What up, y'all? My name is Andru Defeye. I am the Gorilla Poet Laureate, aka the Hoodie God, aka Spittin' Quarantino, aka I wear my sunglasses at night because my eyes are as sensitive as my heart is, y'all. And we are back with another banger for Poetry Month. Give it up. And as per always, I want to encourage you to leave your questions and comments in the comments section, and we will pull them up on screen for you. We have a very special show tonight, but for those of you who are just joining us for the first time, I want to let you know exactly what is going on. This is brought to you by the Sacramento Poetry Salon. So make sure you go follow us on Facebook. All kinds of things going on for National Poetry Month, or as we like to call it in Sacramento, National Guerrilla Poetry Month. I am the current sitting Sacramento Poet Laureate, and I've been interviewing young laureates from around the country, and I have another banger for you tonight. We got the ladies taking over again. We got the homie from Lake County coming out. Oh, we already got our first comment. You rock, Rachel. What's up, y'all? What's up? So we're gonna get into it. Also, I want to give a big shout out to the Sacramento Bee. Not only are they letting us be their broadcast, use their stream to broadcast, but they've been doing some incredible work with the Equity Lab. So we just want to give them a quick shout. We want to make sure that your stories are heard and that stories from your neighborhood are heard, Sacramento. So please, if you have a story that you want to contribute, follow that link right there. And if you have any questions, anything like that, just hit me up. I'm here to help. I'm here to get you published. We're trying to change the culture of journalism in the city a little bit and make sure that it's more representative of everyone who lives in the city, especially our Black and Brown family, our LGBTQIA family. And we're going to just start it off because this is a big mood today. I'm just going to start it off by saying Black lives more than matter. You know what I'm saying? Like, Black family, we with you right now. Okay, we love you. So with that all being said, oh, you so sweet. Thank you for keeping poetry alive. Yo, we just doing what we can out here, and there's a lot of people. Sacramento, this is something people don't know. Sacramento is the capital of poetry on the West Coast. On the West Coast. You know what I'm saying? There's your shout out, bro. There's your shout out, Perdo. We're shouting you out, fam. So yeah, just doing what we can. The salon is about bringing ideas together and bringing thinkers and philosophers together. So that is exactly what we are doing here with the Young Laureates series. I don't know if you caught the one on Tuesday or if you caught the one with Cloudy, our youth poet laureate, a little like last week. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's a lot. If you haven't caught these episodes, make sure you go back and check up on the episodes. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah. Well, we are flooded. We are flooded with the comments right now. I love it. We love to see it. Keep it coming, because right now I'm going to introduce my guest for tonight, and we're going to have a whole lot of conversation and a whole lot of poetry. She is the current Lake County Poet Laureate. Y'all, give it up for Georgina Marie. Hey, and the crowd goes wild. Yep. So first off, before we even start, happy birthday, because it's your birthday today.
It is.
Wow.
Thank you.
And she's spending her birthday with us, y'all. You know what I'm saying? So if you have any questions for Georgina while we do this interview, or you want to request a certain poem, you're a big fan, you want to see if you can get her to do that one poem that you like so much, I can't guarantee. You know what I mean? But you can comment. So just so y'all know, Georgina is from Lakeport, Northern California. She's the Lake County Poet Laureate for 2020 to 2022. So we got matching terms. She's the first Mexican American and the youngest to serve in this role for Lake County. Come on. Give it up. She is the Literary and Poetry Out Loud Coordinator for the Lake County Arts Council and the Poet in Residence for the Lake County Bloom. She has served as co-editor for the Middleton Art Center's Resilience and Restore collections of written word and visual arts, and is assistant poetry editor for Rivet Journal, an online library journal for Red Bridge Press. As part of the Broken Nose Collective, an annual chapbook exchange, she created her first poetry chapbook, Finding the Roots of Water, in 2018, and her second chapbook, Tree Speak, in 2019. In 2020, she was on the Angie Locasio Scholar for the Mendocino Coast Writers Conference. She's currently working on her full-length poetry manuscript, and just reading that bio makes me feel lazy. Georgina Marie.
No,
Yo.
no.
So first off, how you doing? How's your birthday been?
It's great. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to do this, especially on my birthday.
Absolutely.
I see a comment from my mom already. She's tuning in.
Hey, that's Mom. What up, Mom? And like, shout out to you, Mom, because you made this happen. You know what I mean? So let's start. I always, every superhero, I like to start with the origin story. So when did you start writing, and what got you into poetry?
Yeah, I started writing probably around age 15, and I was going through a lot of depression, anxiety, trauma. So when you did your interview, something that really stood out to me was when you said your first poem was a suicide note. That really hit my heart, because that I feel like my own journey is what got me to poetry, and it really saved my life in that time when I was a teenager. So I left public school pretty early. I just couldn't handle it. Lots of bullying, lots of discomfort. And I ended up going to college pretty early, local community college. And it was there that I met an English teacher that introduced me to Sylvia Plath and Virginia Woolf. Sylvia Plath, to this day, is one of my favorite poets. She really goes deep with mental illness, pain, and horror. And it really connected with her. I didn't realize poetry could go that way. That it could be so real and so raw and so painful. And so I connected with that as a young girl. And that's really what got me into poetry.
So what's the process for you to get to be the Poet Laureate of Lake County? Can you walk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, so it's a little different than other cities from what I've heard. Mostly a application process. Very logistical. You submit your poetry, letters of recommendation. I actually applied in 2018 was the first time, and I didn't get it. So I had spent the next 2 years just doing everything that I wanted to do, everything I listed in my mission statement. I still went out and didn't let it hold me back. At that time, it was a panel interview process. So it was a little intimidating going in, and I think I was interviewed by 6 or 7 former poet laureates. There was a public reading. It was very interesting. And so 2 years flew by pretty fast. I reapplied, and I ended up getting it the second time. And that application process involved some other former poet laureates, board of supervisors from Lake County, same application process, submitting poems, my mission statement. I think all of the work I did in the prior 2 years really kind of helped me bump me up to becoming the next poet laureate this time.
Right. And I think that's like, y'all hear me introduce myself as the Guerrilla Poet Laureate. And that was a title that some random person yelled out during an event many, many years ago. And it was because we just been doing the work,
Yeah.
and I think that's where a lot of, you and I really relate and kind of overlap in that way of like, well, I'm going to do this work. So when folks are like, so do you think you can do one poetry project a year as laureate? Like, how many poetry projects I do a year just being Andru? Like, and I feel like you're very much the same way. So this is the kind of a twofold question, because I want to know for you personally, what does that title mean to you? Right. And then number 2, what does it mean that a brown girl is holding that title?
It's important to me, for sure. It was kind of a dream of mine to become a poet laureate, as I've heard you say also. And to me, it's a prestigious title. It's a historical title. And here in California, especially, there's been some amazing poet laureates. I think it's just this sense of leadership you gain when you have this title, and just, you know, just pushing your own literary career forward and having that sense of leading the community, which I really love. And some things may not happen for me that, you know, wouldn't have happened otherwise if I didn't have the title. So it is important to me. It's not the most important, of course, in poetry. I would do what I do without the title, but it's certainly important. And I think being a brown girl in this time is important, because we're in a time where the youth is rising right now, especially with these important issues and with the injustices that Black and brown people are experiencing. So I think especially for youth in Lake County, it's important to see the representation. So I didn't have representation enough growing up. So I think it's important for others to see that, for sure.
Yeah, I definitely, like you, I grew up wanting to be a laureate and aspiring to be a laureate. And also like you, the majority of laureates that I saw were old white men, which for
Yeah.
me wasn't such a depressing thing, because I was like, eventually I'm gonna be an old white man. But I'm just glad to see so much, just so much diversity and inclusion, and it look, I mean, you can tell if you look above me right now at our list of young laureates that are being interviewed, you see, you know, across socioeconomic backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, you know, ages, sexes, lifestyle orientations. Like, there's really some good representation out there. And I think we're seeing more. Is it just me, or are we seeing more young laureates?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Even being appointed this year, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Because like, when I got it, I was like, this is unheard of. And then you were the first one that I met and was like, okay, this is cool. Like, and me and Georgina really connected early on the fact that we were both really young, and that we don't subscribe to some of the norms of poetry, and that we are trying to kind of break some molds. And for me, it was just really nice knowing that there was someone else out there that I could relate to, right? And that there was someone else who, you know, when I started posting about how I don't like Whitman, there was someone else to to back me up on it.
Yeah.
So uh, you've been super busy, as your bio leads us to know, and you just constantly have all kinds of projects. You're doing all kinds of editing. Can you tell us about some of what you've been doing in Lake County so far?
Yeah, for sure. Poetry is my passion. So to be able to do everything I do, even without pay, like I would do it regardless. So I just love being able to connect with the community, and poetry is healing for me. So to be able to bring that to others is really important to me. So I just I come up with ideas and I just go for them. And sometimes I overwhelm myself. So this year I'm trying to be a little better about stopping and doing nothing some days, just lying on the floor with my dogs so I don't get burnt out. But yeah, last year I was appointed in March, right before the pandemic hit. So I had all these plans for these big in-person events, and all of them were, of course, cut off. So right away, I just started doing virtual check-ins to begin with, just checking in with writers, like, how are you feeling?
Mm.
Are you writing? Keep writing, you know, just to encourage folks. Um, I usually work with the farmers market up here, because I love to support local farmers. So a couple of years ago, I started some spoken word poetry readings at the farmers market. We couldn't do that during the pandemic, so we put together like a farmers market poetry themed contest that we could still do and have people submit, you know, electronic poems. Um, so I did that. Let's see, there's so many things that have happened in the last year. Um,
It feels like a decade, right?
I know it does, yeah. A few of the most important things to me I'd mention is I put together a poetry reading for the LGBTQ plus community here in Lake County, which has never been done either, which I was really surprised about. But I have a lot of friends as part of that community. Yeah, and it was really important for me, again, with representation. I'm sure there's a lot of people that are not out in this community, and they don't feel like they can come out because, like you said, it is a very white country, or county, and so I
I
wanted to
mean,
be able to
country
connect.
too.
Century too, yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I put together a pretty cool reading for that. I like to kind of combine my own activism with poetry, so I did put together a big poetry reading for immigrants in detention centers. That was pretty big. We brought a lot of poets from different states, a lot from California. There was a book written called Dreaming America, which is it includes poems from young men in detention centers, most of them who don't speak English, and they're all minors. And then there's a man who went into teach, Seth Michelson, put together a book of their poetry. And someone in the community here read the book and had reached out to a bunch of laureates asking, like, can we do a reading for these kids? And no one ever responded to her. But when she reached out to me, I'm like, yeah, let's do this. And I was feeling pretty bold. So I reached out to the editor and the publishing house of the book. So they came and attended this reading. And
Wow.
yeah, the editor read some stories. He educated us, everyone who attended, about these young kids and what we can do to try to advocate for them.
Oh,
So
that's so
yeah,
beautiful.
lots of big things. I did a reading for climate change, just hoping for rain when we weren't getting enough of it last year, um, which again this year, yeah. So and this year, just lots of different poetry readings. Also trying to put in time for my own writing. Sometimes that's difficult as a laureate.
Absolutely. All right. So I'm gonna throw. I know y'all are already about to flame me because we this far in and she hasn't done a poem yet. But
Yeah.
I just have this question, and I'm just curious because so I talked to my friend Tama, who's the laureate in Stockton, and I talked to her towards the end of last year, and she said, "How's it going?" I said, "It's going great. We're doing this and we're doing that and we're doing this. The only thing is, I can't write. Everything I write is trash. Like, what is going on?" And she just laughed and she said, "Oh, no one told you about that." I said, "What?" She said, "The first year that you're laureate, you just can't write poetry because the title puts so much pressure on you." Do you have that as well? Like, are you finding that in your own writing, like you're more critical because you have this title now? How has the title affected your writing?
Yeah, I feel a sense of I should only put out work publicly that's good. And so I feel that. I don't feel too much pressure privately when I'm writing to myself. But yeah, I can definitely see that. I think there's a little bit of pressure to make sure if I'm a laureate that I'm representing myself with the best of my work.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And we got questions coming in through the chat. Jake chimed in and said, "How do you make time for your own writing?"
Yeah, that's a good question. So I also work full time as a nutritional counselor for women, infants, and children. So
Mm.
that's my full time work, helping like low income families here in Lake County. So between full time work and being a poet laureate really is a full time job. So it can be difficult, but I was listening to Cloudy, who, by the way, is amazing. I loved her interview with you last week. And she had mentioned she writes a line a day, which I thought was pretty awesome. I'm not that disciplined to write a line a day, but I do write lines when they come to me, so I don't lose them. So I always have my iPhone with me, and I'm using the Notes app. I'll write lines, and when I do have time to sit and write, I come back to those lines. So it's kind of like writing in the little moment.
All right, so I'm gonna give you something, and I'm gonna give our listeners something right now. A little pro tip. As someone who had their phone stolen 2 weeks before the Poet Laureate finals with all the poems that I'd written for the last year and a half on it,
Oh my gosh.
get yourself the Evernote app. The Evernote app, you can do everything you can do with notes, but it saves it. So you can log on to the internet via your MacBook or your laptop, whatever, and you can get all of those notes that you had. I mean, I guess if you got an iPhone, save it to the cloud, make sure everything's saving to the cloud. You can do that too. Just make sure it's saved somewhere, because I was not saving everything to the cloud, and I lost literally an entire book of writing that was going to come out and all of the possible poems, which was great because it left me with the two poems that I needed to actually win the laureate. So universe does its universe thing, but you know. All right, y'all. All right, don't flame me in these comments yet. We are going to get to it right now. Georgina, you want to give us a poem real quick?
Absolutely. So not too many years ago, I was actually told that I didn't know how to articulate poetry. So I wrote this poem called Articulating Poetry. Something came to me on a frost-chewed winter morning. 15 years I had lived, rarely touching my feet to the snow. Now 30 years of living, the snow has melted and returned many times. Each time, new words, each time a new winter. I don't know how melon-drenched words come to me in shapes of edible stars, feeding me with a literal sustenance, built as earth movers writing themselves into terms of endearment, into life-altering stanzas, continuing to imprint their weight into the moistened ground, always a few steps ahead and a few steps behind mine. They are as real as paper cuts, coating the wounds like honey. I am asked to articulate where this comes from. What can I say besides one day I woke up choking on air and found words on the floor beneath me? No explanation, every color, every texture, no education to it, no explanation. It is unknown why cherubs live inside my stomach and carbally carve words into the inside lining, cheering excitedly when they know they are being written, when they hear them being spoken, when they feel they are about to choke a new life out of me.
Oof. Oof. One day I woke up choking on air and it was words on the floor, right? That's how that went. Gotta relate to that. So again, our origin stories, they intersect so much. So let's talk about the state of poetry in Lake County. So just a blanket question of what is the current state of poetry in Lake County?
It's flourishing. It's very vibrant.
Dope.
We do have a very rich literary community here in Lake County. And I think sometimes people are surprised, even writers who have lived here all their lives, to find out once they get into a room with other poets or, a Zoom room these days, how many writers there are who just write beautiful work. And here in Lake County, we've had, I think, 6 years now of consecutive wildfires. We have a lot of loss in our own lives. And so there is a lot of trauma in this county. And of course, we each go through our own personal traumas. And when we find writing and when others find writing, or when they finally share their writing, it's a pretty beautiful thing. And we find relation in that and community. So I think we do have a pretty incredible literary community here, for sure.
So let's talk about race. I know some of y'all don't want to talk about that. No, you better find another live stream to watch. So just straight up, how does it feel to be a proudly brown woman poet laureate in a very rural, very white area? What is that experience been like so far?
Well, I turned 33 today, and I think
Wow.
it's taken me 33 years to be comfortable with being a brown woman. And when these kids, Cloudy for one, Alexandra, your other youth poet laureate, when these minority kids come out just being proud of who they are and speaking their poetry, with so much confidence, I wasn't there at that age. And I don't regret it because I'm very happy where I am now in my life. But it was really hard growing up being Hispanic and just being judged so much and being assumed that I work in every grocery store I walk into, even if I'm 12 years old, dressed like a kid, those types of things. So yeah, oh, shout for Native American women. Yeah, I'm predominantly Mexican, also Mojave Indian and German, kind of a mix. But yeah, and sometimes it's hard. I think, like you said, we are not the norm, both of us, in our views and what we stand for. I'm very pro Black Lives Matter. I'm very much pro-immigrant and immigration and human rights if you're not a US citizen. Not everyone feels that way, especially here in Lake County. There's a lot of Republicans. We have a lot of migrant farm workers here who work their asses off every day for our food and for our wine. And not a lot of
Love
people,
them.
yeah, not a lot of people here give them credit, even though our economy is from them. So sometimes it is hard. I've seen other poet laureates from Lake County on, sorry to call them out, but on Facebook, I won't give names, um, that are anti-Black Lives Matter and saying things that are opposed to my opinion, which is fine. You can be who you are. But I think if I'm going to hold this title, I also need to let people know that everyone's included.
Mm, mm. And I mean, I was talking to Roscoe a little bit about it on Tuesday. Out here when Stephon Clark got murdered and the actions started popping up, the people who were leading the actions were the young poets.
Yeah.
They were the kids who came up through the Sacramento Area Youth Speaks program and through Soul Collective, and the voices of the poets were the voices that the city turned to. And I think we're seeing America turn to the poets as well. When you look at Amanda Gorman and Brandon Leak and some of
Yeah.
those folks. Now, my question is, do you realize, like, are there moments throughout your day where you realize how big it is for little brown girls to have a poet laureate who looks like them? Like, are there moments where you're just like, oh my God, I'm doing it. Like I'm part of this like revolution of thought. Or is it just Georgina doing what Georgina has always done?
Yeah, I feel like day to day, I'm a hard worker and I just focus on getting my work done, whether it's my full time work or my poetry work. And sometimes I don't stop to think the positive work that I'm doing or the impact or just my own work. I definitely deal with imposter syndrome. Sometimes I think no matter how hard I work, I just don't deserve it. It's a weird mental thing, but so sometimes it's not until I get a random message from a teenager saying like, "Oh, I'm really excited you're doing this," or from a senior citizen who's like, "Your work is beautiful. Thanks for sharing it with us," or "Thank you for letting me share my work with you." Sometimes it's just hearing feedback from others that make me realize, oh, I am actually making a good impact.
Absolutely. And I mean, that just a little message for everyone out there. Give people their flowers, because you don't ever know, like, well, you don't know. It may be having the hardest day we've ever had. And your words can really change that for folks, especially creatives.
Yeah.
Um, so, while people like to tell us, I mean, I'm sure you've heard it. I've definitely heard it, that like, we want you to do poetry and just stay out of the politics. I mean, it's the same kind of thing where they just want, basketball players to shut up and dribble. It's the same thing that they want haikus. They want roses are red and violets are blue. They don't want social commentary about what's going on, and want us to kind of keep it light. What role do you feel like um, poetry has in activism? What is the role of poets as far as this movement?
Mhm. I think there's always been a connection between politics and social justice and poetry. And so I think, gosh, I don't even know how to explain it. It's definitely a touchy subject for some people. I've even been called out for not wanting things to be overtly political, because sometimes there are some moments where you just want to take a break from all of the struggle, and maybe write a flower poem. And
Right.
but the truth is, this is what we're living in. We have all this political um, and injustice in the world, and um, obviously, when we write what comes from our bodies and what comes from our hearts and what comes from our mind, and so it's bound to come out either way, and we can't just hold those things in. We have to write them out. We have to let them live in the world. So I think whether you don't necessarily think that politics are important, it's what we're living in, and
Mm,
yeah, it's
mm,
important to let it out.
absolutely. Well, and I think, one of the things that I've been really big on here was less about actual poems and more about words specifically, how words are used, how words craft narratives, how these narratives can become passive and we don't even realize what we're saying when we say some of these things, and just the power of words and the magic of words. My elder says that's why we call it spelling, because it's magic. And I think that's definitely a big part of everyone that's involved in this series, and a lot of the like younger laureates that I'm seeing. A lot of the work is around just this narrative change, where it's less. I'm seeing folks focused a little less on their own personal work, like you were talking about, and more on this like community. How do we change some narratives? How do we make sure things are inclusive? How do we make sure art spaces are diverse and representative? So yeah, it's definitely it's a touchy thing too, because sometimes you want to go to a poetry reading to get away, like you said, to get away from all of this. So it's why I always love seeing where other people kind of fall on that. All right, stop hassling me. We had another 15 minutes. You got another poem for us?
Yeah, man, the time's flying. This is too much fun. Okay. This is called All Lives Don't Matter Until Black Lives Do Too.
Let's go.
The regalia blue with a gold star and silver restraints. The men kneeling down on him. The pressure like a dark night sky collapsing onto his neck. In the night, it's not sleep but hopelessness that claims me. And even I don't have the fear of not being able to breathe. When I introduce myself to my neighbors, my unfriendly neighbors, they only wonder how a brown girl could speak English or tend to her property, keeping it tidy and obedient to the law. They look at me as if I don't belong living next to them in an orderly house with my Mexican looks. I worry if they'll poison my dog or kill my cat. Even then, I still don't worry that if they call the police, I won't be able to breathe. As the prompt goes, you won't need your happy pill in the afterlife. You will be whole again. Maybe dark skin will be lighter so you can live longer. The knee lifting softly off of your neck in time for a deep, deep breath.
Ooh, let's go. Let's go. So powerful, and such an important message, as we're back to it again.
Yeah. I wrote that soon after George Floyd passed, and obviously we're in the middle of the trial now, so it's pretty hard to see this happening still.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so I'm gonna shift my gears real quick, and we're gonna talk the meat and potatoes of poetry itself. So there is an ongoing, raging debate that has been going on forever about the stage and the page, right? Everybody's there's kind of this idea that you're one or the other, right? Like, are you a stage poet or are you a page poet? So first off, I want to ask you, which one do you consider yourself? And then like what do you think the roles are of both of these different styles of poetry?
Yeah, I think I kind of lean more towards being a page poet because I love to write and just read in silence, honestly. Um, I don't consider myself, like, obviously not a slam poet, and not like an intense spoken word poet. I'm very soft spoken, obviously. But I feel like I'm pretty balanced, honestly. And I was listening to Roscoe too on Tuesday, and I really like how he was just explaining it. Even if you are more of a spoken word or stage poet, it doesn't lessen who you are as a writer or being a writer. You're still a writer. It doesn't take away from that. Um, and I think for many poets, it is a combination. You can be a stage poet, but sometimes you have a poem that's just better read on paper, or that someone might hear and it's like, oh, I need to read that again, or I need to read it on paper to experience it a different way. And a lot of my work, I think, reads well on paper, but there are some that when I read aloud, it's just like they have this life and it needs to be read aloud to be out in the world, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I said I'm learning the art of the page.
Mm.
I come from that slam world, and it was a whole different beast. Like learning the page because if I had a weak line, not that I've ever written a weak line in my life, all right, y'all, but if I had a weak line in the poem, I could inflect, I could do something cool with my voice, I could wiggle it around and it allowed me to kind of dress it up a little bit, where for me, when I started writing on the page, I was like, oh, there is nothing to hide behind. Like my poem is either good or it's not good. And there's no way for me to like really put anything over it to mask it or help it out, you know? So I think you're, and I think there's this wave. I think a lot of the young laureates do both.
Mhm.
In like we all kind of lean to one more than the other. But I know a lot of the older poets are like, I'm a page poet,
Yeah.
right? Like they're very, very firm in what they are, where I think the young poets kind of fluctuate in between the two. Now you have one of your big messages is about poetry being for everyone, regardless of academic education, regardless of like you got an MFA or you got like a kindergarten graduation certificate, poetry is for you. So where does that come from for you?
Yeah. Oh, that would be so cute if we had little kindergarten poetry certificates for students.
Hey, let's start giving them out. We're laureates now. We can do that.
I love that. Well, I do have a college degree, but I don't have an MFA. And I think, especially when you are more of a page poet and you're submitting to literary reviews and whatnot, there is sort of a status that comes with having an MFA or being educated and how far you can go as having a career in the literary world. And so I think sometimes people, especially young folks, think you have to have that education behind you in order to be a poet. And I just don't feel like that's the case. Poetry comes from our history as storytellers, as just being humans and needing to speak our lives and who we are and our souls. So I feel like education really doesn't have anything to do with it. I mean, of course, you're going to get better. You're going to learn more about the form of poetry, and you're always going to improve your craft. And that's not to say that anyone who has an MFA is not as good as someone who doesn't. Everyone has their choice to do what they like. I just don't want people to feel like you have to have this massive education in order to be a poet or to be a good poet. Because I don't have that big education behind me, and I'm doing pretty well making it in the world, especially as a poet laureate, I think. And
Right.
yeah, one of the quotes I sent you to was I was giving an interview with the Lake County Bloom locally here, and I mentioned you don't have to be Shakespeare, because I think also there's this, maybe even with people of color, especially, or young poets of color, is you have to be like the old white men poets, and you need to write like them and write with this, old historical language. And I just don't feel like that's the case. Write what you want, be who you are. Poetry is limitless. You can do anything with it.
Absolutely. And something I always tell folks is like the griots and the bards didn't have a formal education. You know what I'm saying? Like they didn't go to college. So one of the okay, hold on. Let me pause so I can pull some of these comments up because I'm getting flooded a little bit here. All right, poetry, it feels good to express our inner emotions. Yes, that's what I'm talking about. Del Rey says, powerful. This is in response to your poem that came flooding in. Jen says, maybe soft spoken, but so loud in message. Your energy is screaming. And Leonard, one of our OGs out here, says the university is in the books. I love that. I love that quote. So what is, we talked a little bit about your writing practice, but let's dive into it a little bit more, right? So you like, if a line comes to you, you write it down. Do you have certain days or certain times that you're like, I'm going to dedicate this to writing? Also, I want to encourage anyone who's watching, if you have comments or if you have questions, go ahead and type them into the comments and we will ask Georgina as soon as you send them in. So, you know, it's open for you. But what is your general writing practice?
Mhm. I definitely try to dedicate Saturday mornings to work, to do my own work. Sorry, my dog's making noise in the background. Yeah, I joined a network called the Shuffle Collective, which is kind of a network for creative folks. And every Saturday they do creativity circles where you just work in silence, but on Zoom for like 2 hours. And that's really helped me be able to have a routine to dedicate my time to writing. So otherwise I get carried away doing other things. So yeah, working Saturday mornings or Sundays really helped me just to do things on the weekend. Um, and also, I think it's important sometimes to just schedule the time in my calendar so I actually sit and write. That can be really important. Um, but honestly, I know it's probably not the best thing to not have a great routine if you're a laureate, but sometimes it's just like coming home after work and I'm just lying around with my dogs and drinking tea, and it's like, oh, something just came to me. I'm going to sit and write. And I think sometimes my best work comes when I'm not feeling too pressured.
Yeah. I'm a big one on, you know, one of my mottos is alignment over hustle. So for me, my writing process is like, stop stressing out about things,
Mhm.
feel good, find some joy, and
Yeah.
then write when you're in that good space, when you're in that like really positive space, and write and see what comes out.
Yeah.
So I'm always super interested in hearing other people's, as well as the $1,000,000 question. Because Roscoe told us it wasn't real on Tuesday. You said it was fake and it was a lie.
Mhm.
What do you do to beat writer's block?
Yeah. Oh, I love when he said that because I was thinking this month, like, oh, I'm encouraging all these people to write for National Poetry Month, but I'm blocked and I'm not writing. And then I heard him say that. I'm like, all right, I need to go write. It's not real. There's no such thing. I do have moments and days or months sometimes where I feel blocked, and especially certain topics, I just can't get them out for some reason. I think I've definitely learned with anything in life, just I have to push myself through the challenge, even if it makes me feel uncomfortable. And sometimes it's living in that discomfort that I end up thriving, and meeting a new place in my life. And so sometimes I tend to find that when I really sit down, when I'm not, not able to write and just force myself or push through it, something comes. And sometimes I do have days where I just need to leave it alone. Maybe something else is going on in my anxiety or in my heart, and it's like, okay, now is not the time to write to me. When poems are ready to be born, they'll just come. So it's kind of a balance of not pushing yourself too hard, and other times making sure you do push yourself.
All right. We have a question in the chat. How do you decide what writing is for you and what's for sharing with others? Oh, $1,000,000 question. Thanks, Jen.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. That's a great question. Um, there are topics for me typically on the lines of childhood trauma, sexual assault, um, some things that I write about that are just so personal that it feels like it's going to be hard for me to even read those things out loud. Um, one of my sisters passed away a couple of years ago. We were best friends, and at first, it was really hard to read anything that had to do with her because I would cry in public reading a poem about her. So then I felt like I need to keep things to myself for a while. Um, but then again, it's kind of a I don't even know how to explain it in a clear way. That sometimes it's just you kind of have to push through these challenges sometimes, and I find that these things that I tend to keep to myself, when I do finally decide to share them, there's always someone who relates to it and was waiting for someone else to say it. And that's the case with some of the deepest, most personal poems, vulnerable poems of mine. So I think you have to sometimes challenge yourself and know that someone else is probably waiting to listen to that. But at the same time, trust your own body, trust your own trauma. If you're not ready to share it, don't share it. Listen to yourself too.
And I think, you know, I just want to add on a little bit to that, coming from the slam world. You know, there is this thing where we encourage you to drag your trauma out, drag the skeletons out of your closet and dance with them for a score, and try and get a 10. And the more trauma you can bring out to dance, then the higher your score will be. And I personally feel this is super dangerous for our youth. You know, we're having them dredge up all of this trauma without therapy, right? Like, we don't have professionals. The slam is not therapy, y'all. You know what I mean? So I think like, you hit on some really beautiful points, that like, it's about you processing through some of these things before you're willing to share some of these trauma-based pieces. And when you do, I find just like you do, that when I do share those things, there's always someone in the crowd who's like, yo, I needed to hear that. But they needed to hear it from a safe space inside of my chest, and not an unsafe space where, you know, I'm not comfortable with this and I haven't actually healed from the trauma. You know, and just seeing that healing side is super good for folks too.
That's
yeah,
a good
thank you. That was
Yeah, sorry, that's a good disclaimer to say too, because some of the more difficult poems, if folks hear me read them in the background, you know, that no one sees, I am going to therapy and like processing through it. So it's important. I am always there for people who want to share difficult poems with me, and I'm there to support you. But do know that, you know, don't push yourself too far if you're not ready to process that.
absolutely. And all poets should go to therapy. Straight up.
Yeah.
Everybody should go to therapy, but poets should definitely be going to therapy. Thank you for speaking truth to this. Expressive poetry can be and is therapeutic, but triggering others isn't cool. And sometimes we trigger ourselves when we stay in the trauma through writing. Say it again. Say it again.
Right.
Speaking as a poet and a therapist. Come
Thank you.
on. 24 karat. So we are at 47 minutes. So it is time for another Georgina Marie classic.
Awesome. So one of my favorite poets ever is Ada Limon. I don't know if folks listening in are familiar with her work. She's a beautiful poet, and I had the pleasure of taking a workshop with her this last weekend. So talking about being blocked, I had a breakthrough and I wrote this poem, and it's for my dogs. It doesn't have a title yet. Year after year, day after day, seconds after seconds, canines multiply like rabbits in a springtime frenzy. 2 of them have found their way on my now saliva-lined sofa, sleeping soundly, sighing softly as they inhale safety and exhale their worry in the comfort of their stable home. She, named after an African country, Kenya, motherland, for her strength. He, named after a Seminole word, Miko, chief, ruler of my heart. Both breeds considered a threat. The Mexican-born German in her, the fight in him, all existing in me. My Mexican genes seen as a threat to America, home of the brave and the drug-sniffing Latinx. The underdogs we all are, human, animal. I see these big magical beings as holy, like I see my brown skin. A reflection of earth, of soil, of how we are all multiplied in this world, how we start out as cells and blood, and there is no brownness or whiteness or fear in the beginning, how we all enter this world to a first breath as science, as magic, how some of us go from there to needing to be rescued, from being discarded as nothings, as others, how we then rescue each other.
Yeah. That poem had all of my favorite things in it. We had some revolution going on. We had some love. We had some magic, and we had dogs. You know, one of my literary heroes, Jose Montoya, I was doing a reading recently in his honor, and one of the folks who knew him in life said, yeah, he used to say that if the poem sucks, put a dog in it. And I was like, that's the best advice that I've ever heard in my life. So that was great. Thank you for sharing that. So we could not have a conversation, a full-on interview, without talking about one Walt Whitman. one of the first like real connections that me and Georgina made was fighting with people on Facebook, um, uh, and it was around Whitman, and folks were celebrating this dude. And the thing is that Walt Whitman was a racist. Yes, it was a different time, but he was still racist. And so, there was a big thing about the folks in his hometown. When the statues started coming down, his was one of the ones that people were trying to take down, and a lot of the literary world got up in arms about it. And Georgina, who is very soft-spoken and very kind and not very loud or abrasive, such as myself, when Georgina decides that she's gonna like go at somebody for something, I'm like, oh, it must be serious, you know what I mean? And she had gone after some folks who were defending this dude. And can you just talk a little bit about, what your feelings are on not only Whitman, but this like upholding of mediocre white men as the standard in literature and poetry, especially?
Yeah, I love that you bring this up because that was I was so heated in that whole debate. So there was this poetry group on Facebook, and they're still very much active, but someone had posted some quotes from Walt Whitman, and clearly, like you said, he was racist. He's a very revered poet, of course, and he does have some nice work, some beautiful work with Leaves of Grass, which has actually inspired a poem of mine in the past. But learning about his history, it's important to learn these things about writers. And some people say you can separate the writer from the art. But for me, if you're racist, if you're abusive, I can't separate your work from that. It's like important to hold up what that person was like. And I don't want to support your work if you're that kind of person. So it is, I was very heated with that. And the problem I had was that when Walt Whitman starts coming up and people were like, oh, well, that was a different time. It's okay. He's a great poet. You can just let go of that. It's like, but now's the time that people are dying still because of what their color is. And you need to stand up and speak against that. You need to let people know that, okay. So I think the fact that it was a different time doesn't really matter. Now is a different time. We need to be able to speak up for what's important. And I don't even know what to say. I'm like mad again.
I love the response to "it was a different time" is now is a different time.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good
And
one.
I will say, Georgina is responsible for one of the most nerve-wracking, exciting, and wonderful poetry moments that I had in 2020, because I got to come to and perform at Georgina's inauguration as poet laureate. And I had these two poems. So I wrote a Walt Whitman diss poem after seeing this whole thing go down. So really inspired by Georgina and the action she was taking. And then I had this other poem that was really nice and wasn't controversial and made no waves whatsoever. And I was sitting the whole time this reading was going on going, which one of these am I going to do? Which one am I going? And then I remembered, I always tell my kids, do the one that's going to scare you. It'll always feel better in the end. And I got to do that poem. And it was a very interesting, like Georgina really appreciated it. So I was like, okay, I know I'm good because like it's her event. And there were some eyeballs in the Zoom that were not super excited about what I was saying about Whitman. But, I also know that he was held up as the standard for so long. And when I was coming up, that was the standard of American poetry. And to me, it didn't move me, right? And I'm not here to say that Whitman, I'm not going to get off on a tangent, y'all, about Whitman. And I'm not going to diss Whitman super hard because I know some of y'all really love this dude's work or whatever. I'm just saying it didn't move me and it didn't speak to me and it doesn't speak to everyone. And it especially doesn't speak to young poets of color when you have a man who was actively racist being taught to them as what poetry is. So I definitely just applaud the effort to kind of change what we're upholding. I'm not saying that we need to cancel a dude and get rid of all of his books and all of that. I'm just saying maybe we don't hold him up as the standard of American poetry when we got Maya Angelou in this country. You know what I'm saying? That's all.
Exactly.
I'm gonna leave it. I'm gonna leave it there. Decolonizing poetry, yo, mad real, and that's such a great way to put it, Del Rey. Thank you. All right, so let's move forward because I'll talk smack about Whitman all night with you.
I do have to say though, real quick, your Whitman poem was so beautiful. It was beautiful. I was so happy you chose to read that one at my inauguration.
You make me blush. So you put out 2 chapbooks with Broken Nose Collective. First off, can you tell us a little bit about Broken Nose Collective?
Yeah, shout out to Jeremy Benson. I don't know if he's watching, and Jody Ann Stevenson. So Jeremy Benson was the poet laureate of Napa, and I met him at the Calistoga Library. As poet laureate, he's also, I think he was the youngest poet laureate in Napa, and also a farmer. And he used to do some meet and greet hours at the Calistoga Library, which I thought was kind of cool. You just come in and meet the poet laureate. So I went to meet him because I was really interested in collaborating, meeting new young poet laureates. And he ended up inviting me into this chapbook collective he does, originally from Michigan, with poets from different states, a lot of his own, friends from Michigan. And each year they get together, put together handmade chapbooks and send them to everyone, across the country, whoever's involved in this group. So I was invited to do it, and I had been wanting to do a chapbook for years, but I just needed like a kick in the behind to do it. So they really helped me do that. And so I've created 2 chapbooks, and I ended up producing a lot more, excess copies and selling them, and people really wanted my work, which was awesome. And I hand bind all of them. I like to do book binding.
Yeah, we just getting some of that started. Shout out to Leonard. I don't know if he's still in the chat, but that's our binding wizard out here. So you've got 2 chapbooks out. Your bio tells us that you are working on a full-length manuscript. Now, for those who may not be familiar, first off, can you give us what the difference is between a chapbook and a full-length manuscript of poetry?
Yeah, so a chapbook is essentially a small book of poems. You might have like maybe 10 to 20 poems or less than that. Full-length poetry book, you're going to have a whole collection of your work, and it'll probably range from like 40 to 60 or more poems.
So what is the theme, or do we have I'm going to ask for an exclusive if you got it for the half of the internet that is watching this right now. Is there a due date, maybe a working title? Is there a theme? Give us something that you've never told anyone about this manuscript.
Yeah, well, I'd like to have it done and start sending it to publishers by the end of this year. I'm really working hard on it. I'm between titles. I can't decide. I can't make up my mind. Most of the poems have to do with nature and grief. Because I do live in a rural country, it's beautiful here. Certain parts of Lake County, I should say Lake County has a very high level of poverty, of drug use, of homelessness, unemployment. We have our struggles, but we are a strong county, and we're surrounded by this natural beauty. So it naturally makes its way into my poetry. But as does grief. I've had a lot of losses over the last few years, people and animals close to me. Also, like, as we mentioned, therapy, working through therapy at my age, a lot of things come up and a lot of new grief comes up. So grief and nature are probably the 2 main themes of this poem, or this manuscript. There's a lot of poems on love and loss. There's a lot of birds in my poems because I do bird watching from my home. Yeah.
All right. But we'll know as soon as it does have a working title. Yes. We want first dibs over here at the Poetry Salon. What else? What else are you working on for the year? What are your big laureate projects? What's bouncing around in your brain?
Yeah. Well, earlier I mentioned I like to pair my poetry with activism. I'm a big animal activist. I should mention my dogs make it into my poetry sometimes. So at some point, I do want to kind of pair some animal-related poetry into maybe a poetry contest here in Lake County, also to bring awareness and support to the local animal shelters, because adoption is really important. There's so many animals that need homes. And this month for National Poetry Month, there's 2 contests I've been doing that are really interesting. One of them is on disaster preparation, which was a collaboration between NCO, North Coast Opportunities, Listos California, and the Lake County Bloom. Every week we do a different theme on disaster preparation, and we do a live poetry reading on Friday evenings and choose a winner. They win like a $100 gift card. It's a 6-week poetry contest. It's very challenging to write about disaster preparation as a poet and make it poetic, but the poets that have been doing it are just phenomenal. And there's some younger poets starting to kind of come into this month, National Poetry Month, but it's also National Donate Life Month. My sister who passed was waiting for a kidney donation. And so it's a topic that's very important to me. I have another sister that went through many years of needing a kidney transplant. So I wanted to also pair poetry with that. So I partnered with the Lake County Bloom to do a poetry contest called Poetry of the Body. And anyone, even outside of Lake County, can submit to this contest. The theme is the body or organ donation. There'll be some cash prizes, and the poems will be published through the Lake County Bloom. So if anyone's listening, feel free to go to my website, georginamarie.poet.com. There's information on the contest. I'd love to read poems on the body.
Yeah.
There's always things coming up for me when I have an idea. I just go for it. So people can follow me on social media or on my website to keep up with what's going on.
And we are going to put that up right now. This is the link that you can find her at georginamariepoet.com. Find all of the information she was just talking about. And are your previous works for sale on their website?
Yes, both of my chapbooks. And I pretty much hand make them as sales happen. So they're fresh.
All right. And you said the best ways to keep up with you are at the website. You see the Instagram right above her head at Georgina Marie Poet. Any other ways that people should know of to get a hold of you or to follow you?
Yeah, I think that's it. My website, I'm on Facebook, Instagram. I'm learning Twitter. And
be careful. Be careful.
That might come with my age. I'm still learning that. I barely just learned Snapchat.
Yeah, I'm learning TikTok as we speak. Like that's my newest endeavor. So I mean we come into the end of things. Now, before I ask you for the last poem of the night, just any advice to folks who are, a lot of people are just kind of starting to write because it's Poetry Month, or they're kind of diving in a way that they haven't since maybe they were in school. So any advice just generally for young people or new poets that are getting into the art form?
Yeah. Gosh, if I could narrow it down, I think I would really say everything is okay. And I need to remind myself of that all the time. Anything you write is okay. Anything you share is okay. Don't be too hard on yourself. I always have to remind myself that. But everything is okay. Everything you write is going to be okay. Every step you take to progress as a writer is going to be okay. It's part of your evolution and part of your progress. And just keep doing it. Keep writing. We need more poets in the world.
We love to see it. So you want to take us out with one last poem?
Yeah. So I wanted to actually read the first poem of my manuscript.
Yes, this is the exclusive we've been waiting for. Bam, 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 bam.
So this is To Be Still is to Be Animal. How the sun glimmers and glistens through valley oaks on a rustic hillside. How the warmth permeates amber honey skin and a tense body loosens. How the ground cover of fallen autumn leaves aches of a soothing vibrancy. How I breathe between these happenings. How yearning for more makes the muscles weak, turns the heart to a tiny blue egg, an oval shape, a crack on all sides as if someone took it and threw it into the night sky. how the brittle shell was adorned with cornflower and flaxen, how I came home to myself after the breaking, half human, half bird, how winter frost is arriving again, how a hunger remains, how the burrowing owl and the American robin observe, witnessing all of this, how they don't swallow time in the same way or long for difference. What if all of this was enough? Thank you so much.
Mm. And it's so beautiful because those were, while everything was going on last year and there's all of this chaos in the world and we don't know what's going to happen. I've been homebound really heavy. I'm the lockdown laureate of Sacramento. And, a lot of my time was spent in the backyard and just listening to the birds. And it was so soothing because it was like, yo, they don't care. I don't care about COVID. I don't care about none of that. And it was beautiful just to see, and then you saw nature kind of restore itself a bit because all of us were inside and everybody stopped driving around and messing with nature. Like, really beautiful. I'm going to pull up a couple of comments before we get out of here. Thank y'all for this interview series. Good to connect in new ways through poetry. Absolutely, absolutely. Del Rey, you make sure you connect with Georgina. Y'all should definitely know each other and be connected. All right, and this one's a little long, and it might make you cry, but it's your birthday. Thank you, Andru, Defeye, for these series. You are amazing. All these laureates are so amazing. Thank you for honoring my beautiful, talented daughter, Georgina Marie, here tonight. She amazes me more and more each day, us too. Her writings are so deep, powerful, and heartfelt. Her big heart towards all are so overwhelming. She's such a strong woman. She's brought so much to Lake County as our poet laureate. Thank you both for sharing. And we echo all of them sentiments, and we just want to give you a shout out, Mom, because you did that. You know what I mean? You did that. Come on. And then, the hearts just flooding in. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you both for your positive energy. Man, I love you, fam. So yes, it's been a really beautiful conversation. I knew it would be. I knew this would be a very important conversation to have. And just thank you for the work you're doing, for the vocalness that you do it with, and the love that you move with. It's really it keeps me cool, because I just be wanting to wild out and be all wild, but then I look at Georgina and I'm like, you could just keep it cool. You know what I mean? So just thank you for your example, not only for me, but for all the young people in Lake County. Your poetry is an inspiration. Love how you write about controversial topics that many don't want to hear. Thank you. And that sums it up. Keep writing all of that. Don't ever bite your lips, as my elder says. You know what I mean? So I love you, and we could do this all night. But it's been an hour.
Yeah.
It's been an hour and 10. You know what I mean? We a little past. And where did the time fly? Right? Any last words for the half the internet that's watching?
I have to say thank you to you, Andru. Thank you for having me on. The lineup for this series is incredible. I'm so honored to be part of it. I'm looking forward to Alexandra next week. And thank you for all of the work you're doing. You're doing equally important work, if not more. Thank you.
All the love, all the love. All right, y'all. That brings us to the end of another Young Laureate interview series. Make sure that you tune in next week. So on the Sacramento Bee page, and maybe on some of our other broadcast partners, who knows, we are going to re-air Cloudy's interview on Tuesday night because it didn't get aired on the Sacramento Bee page originally. So make sure you catch that. It was an incredible interview. And then Thursday, we have Alexandra Quinn coming to join us, who is not only one half of Sacramento's poet laureates, the youth poet laureates, right? That's Cloudy and Alex. Alexandra is also in the running. She's the Western Region Ambassador. There are 4 people in the running to take over Amanda Gorman's spot as National Youth Poet Laureate, and Alexandra Quinn is one of them, y'all. And she comes from Sacramento, and no big deal. She's like getting ready to go to Harvard too in the meantime. You know what I mean? Like, She's incredible. I had an opportunity to interview her for an article that I wrote for the Bee, and it was just an amazing article. She's such a little light. So y'all make sure you tune in next Tuesday and Thursday. We will be here with the Youth Poet Laureates. Shout out to Sacramento Area Youth Speaks for all their work bringing these young people up. And you know what it is. This is the Sacramento Poetry Salon. Make sure you follow us on Facebook. My name is Andru Defeye, and Black Lives More Than Matter. Black lives cultivate, Black lives inspire, Black lives beautify. We love y'all. We love y'all. We love y'all. We love y'all. So yeah, we'll see you next week, y'all. Love and light.